This is Shredders. We're here on Xbox Series X, diving into this next-gen indie-like, well, snowboarding experience. So be sure to like the video, subscribing's great as well. So you may be wondering, wow, how is this crazy radical experience running on Series X? Well, according to the developers, they kind of threw that mention along, it's got, well, they called it multi-resolution rendering. So what they mean is it's a dynamic resolution scaling 4K at 60 FPS, and this also features cross-gen multiplayer action or cross-platform action, so you can play with others, and it's got a sort of 16-player multiplayer sort of action thing that you can adjust from the settings. So this is kind of a neat game, and like I said, it's an indie skateboarding type of experience. So it actually really has the ambitions of being some sort of like AAA type snowboarding thing, kind of like SSX, similar snowboarding type games that we have of today. Maybe Steep. We haven't actually had an SSX in a while. I miss that franchise. And this one sort of ignites that same feeling of, hey, we've got a snowboarding game. It's got some crazy action to it. It's got some fun moments. It's kind of neat. So, what exactly do you do in this game? Well, there's a plethora of different missions that you could take part in. You're kind of like part of this radical group that's doing videos for YouTube, basically. And you are kind of meeting new characters, going along the slope, and exploring, well, what is present. And I think that's really quite cool as you dive down and you visit these cool places and do these little missions. Now, the dialogue and whatnot is really corny, and the voice lines aren't the best, but the music kind of hides that. We have the music turned off, obviously, for, copyright reasons and whatnot, but, the music is a little zen. It kind of works for this. I think it's kind of nice. But yeah, you just sort of go along these slopes and you do all these different missions, and then eventually you go to a new area once you've done enough of the missions, and you keep going from there. The multiplayer has a bunch of different options that are present. Ooh. So you can go into the multiplayer settings and you can turn it on and off. Like I said, 16 players and stuff like that, cross-play stuff. So that's kind of cool. So the game's performance is not necessarily perfect. Like, it's definitely got, some issues here or there, that's for sure. It's definitely not perfectly fluid. But for the most part, as you're going down the slope, it's not too bad, actually. For an indie-type offering, I don't think it's a big deal. Now, there are a lot of, glitches and whatnot that I've come across. Nothing that really ruins the experience, but I have noticed where it's, if you do, a bit of a rewind and a character is talking, the dialogue starts to basically overlap. So it'll be like, Steph, do this, and then it'll be like, Steph, oh, Steph, do this, and, it'll kind of, overlap what they're saying, and if you keep redoing the rewind over and over and over again, it just keeps adding more and more layers to the audio, which is kind of funny, and I've done this multiple times. That's why I'm kind of mentioning it, because I just thought that was very, very funny. So this is, to me, like a kind of a neat experience. You go on the slope, you cause crazy mayhem, you do wild things. There's grind rails, there's lots of different places for you to visit, and lots of different combos for you to pull off. And the missions also act as a bit of a tutorial, because they teach you very slowly what what the different moves are, so that you can unleash and get points on your board for doing tricks. I'm just trying to show off a bunch of stupid stuff, if you're wondering. But I did actually find that this is a little bit hard to get, the control. The controls don't seem really easy and intuitive, if that makes sense. They actually seem like they are a little bit tough to deal with at times, if that makes sense. I was kind of hoping that they would be a little bit more simplistic, because it can be a little intimidating getting into. I myself found, at many situations, I was just kind of like, it's not quite hitting the mark for me trying to do this backflip, or, and I guess you could say it's almost got a little bit more realistic of an element to it. It's not just like an arcadey type of snowboarding game. It actually is leaning a little bit into simulation, so you're not necessarily going to be pulling off, radical, insane SSX type moves, right? And I think that's fine. It's just at the same time, I was kind of like at times I was just trying to pull off a trick and it would just, it just wouldn't really go. And I was just like, ah, and that would be frustrating. But I do think it's kind of cool. There does seem to be quite a bit of content here between the different, race options that are present. And it's a pretty neat game. Like, this really does kind of make me feel a little bit like it's like Amped or SSX or, again, steep, but not as, like, doing random stuff. You actually have a little bit more purpose in this one than you would in, like, say, Steep. Or, I guess also a recent one would be, like, Riders Republic, right? It is a little, again, maybe cringy to a degree, or, kind of, like, silly, or, kind of very indie-like in its narrative, but it's cool that they tried to do something like that. I actually got some good laughs out of the different little characters interacting with each other. It's kind of funny, but I think the important part of this one is the snowboarding, right? Like going across these different environments. The snow deformation is actually pretty good for this type of experience. Like when we're moving through this harder snow here, seeing it all deform, that's really quite well done. There's also this feature, I don't think we can trigger it here because they're kind of like on timeout, I guess. But there's this feature where you can actually get a snowmobile to kind of guide you along, and that's sort of cool. And it'll take you like up the mountain and stuff. It's just like it's got some really neat gameplay mechanics to it that I found were kind of interesting. Like I do actually think this is a pretty, decently comprehensive snowboarding game. Something we don't have a bazillion of. I just keep doing like silly flip things here. Like it does have the whole kind of carving to build up speed, and it's got like a slow down slow down mechanic where you could kind of like, slow down your snowboard if you don't want to go too fast, or you can kind of go full tilt and go a little bit quicker. Why is that kind of going like this? But it's just kind of like a really neat sort of experience. There we go. Now we're slowing down. And I think that in itself is just really impressive what they were able to do here. Just in terms of like the different, positions. And it all seems to load really fast too. There's like a little bit of a slow initial loading in. But once you get in, you're just sort of exploring this crazy open world, having some fun with it, doing some radical things, exploring the landscape. It keeps track of all your points, unlocking achievements, transferred 3 rails, wow, okay, and just pulling off some radical stunts. I think it's a lot of fun. I think it's kind of neat. Like I said, if you kind of are into any of the racing snowboarding games or tricky snowboarding games that I kind of labeled off, like SSX or Steve or Amped. I know some of those are probably dating me a little bit, but, those ones are still fun. And I think this is kind of a solid little smaller attempt at it. I think if they do, actually continue onwards from this, like, base building point, like, I think the next entry could actually be, like, a really, really phenomenal sort of snowboarding type game. Because they have all the core mechanics down. I would like a little bit more of like an arcadey setting if that could be possible. But they do have like the movement down, they've got the tricks down, there's a little bit of, personalization and stuff you could do here. But I think there is a lot to actually like within this experience. There's even some like editor type things if you want to do some like, I guess, film video type things. There's a couple options for doing trick editing and stuff like that, so you might find that to be kind of intriguing. There actually is quite a lot going on in this, and then of course like that multiplayer element as well I think is kind of neat. Kind of that passive sort of thing going on. I think that's kind of a cool feature. But you get like a good sense of scale. You do feel like you're out in the mountains, which is nice. You do get to pull off crazy tricks, and you can smash into things and, cause all kinds of problems as you go about trying to be wild out here. And I think that's kind of cool, is just like the speed of pulling off these crazy tricks. Trying to pull off these crazy tricks and failing miserably. But that's the thing, right? Like, you gotta have, like, this skill stick type scenario, basically, that they got playing on here, where you use the right stick and the left stick in combination to do some of the spin things and whatnot. And then there's some slight, like, button inputs as well. But I think those that like... I'm definitely stuck in here. That like snowboarding will find this game to actually be quite a lot of fun. It's got some silly moments to it. Like I said, the story does provide an odd laugh or two. I thought some of the stuff they were doing was uh, kind of entertaining to me. Just like all the weird things going on. It was kind of a little quirky, I guess you would say. But as you could see in like some of these spots here, like sort of when you're going and sort of starting off, and the occasional jump, you're definitely going to notice that there is that like weird kind of performance drop, and I don't quite get why that's the case. I mean, other than that, it does like all run well. You know, it's not like there's any rendering issues or anything that I really noticed. You know, you might see, as you're kind of seeing there, maybe some like bits of like shadow kind of popping in, but with the snow terrain just being snow in the distance, to me it all seems to be running really effectively well. And again, the snow deformation, props to the team on that effort. It is really, really well done. I'm genuinely impressed by what they were able to put together there. Because again, keep in mind, this is like very much an indie type effort, right? And it actually feels a lot grander in scale than that. And I think that in itself should be, you know, kind of cheered, and it's just kind of really impressive. Like, I'd really love to see them take this template and just push it further, do some kind of like crazy, you know, maybe customization options and stuff and tracks and that for a future one and whatnot. I think you could really get things cooking. You know, it's just like, it's kind of neat because I like these games. It makes me every day, every other day I kind of sit there and I'm like, ah, I would love a new SSX, right? Like, just that crazy snowboarding action. And I think this one sort of does something similar, not to the same degree, right? Like, it's not arcadey, but it kind of makes you feel almost like the origins of the SSX, if that makes sense. Kind of like more of a realistic modern day approach where they're like trying to create a video, getting picked up by this other crew that needs to do video stuff, and then working together to create some radical moments and learn a bit about the slopes and different styles that they can pull off. And they've got like little kind of funny style to them because they're all, you can tell they made no like character faces or anything. They're all just wearing masks and stuff. It's just hilarious, that aspect of it. But it's really well hidden. And again, I want to, I don't want to sound any negative like elements towards it. It's like, for the scale of what this is, it's actually not too bad at all. I'm like, oh, I actually quite like this. I think this is kind of cool. And definitely something a bit strange, that's for sure. But very entertaining. So I think a lot of people find this to be an exciting experience. Something with some different moments to it. A lot of different hills and locations for you to visit. And then, of course, you unlock more as you go through it. It would have been nice to also have more of an open option, because it does take quite a while to get things cooking. Like, it definitely feels like you have to, I guess you would say, kind of almost grind out a little bit some of the story stuff before you get to start actually playing around and visiting some of the different spots. There's also some checkpoints that you might find to be a little frustrating in regards to like trying to do the missions. Like, there's one, I don't know how to also describe it. There was one where I'm going to like a hill like this. Oh look, I've bailed 100 times. Lovely. I was going to like a hill like this, but I had screwed up, and then it kept like resetting the tutorial thing and being like, just as I was about to go up the mountain, it would be like, or up to the jump, it'd be like, okay, this is how you do an actual jump. And then when it like went back into gameplay, I wasn't able to actually be able to do that jump, and I found that kind of annoying. Oh look, now I've also got rode 50 kilometers. You come in, you do a video, and you just unlock all the achievements, I guess. That's fantastic. See, we're reviewing and unlocking gamer score. That is the way to go. At least that's the way I prefer it. But I hope I've kind of given you maybe a little bit of an idea of, kind of how it's running, some of the tricks you could pull off, some of the movement. Obviously, I'm not like some kind of crazy snowboarding superstar, but I've unlocked some different areas. I've had some fun. I've been playing around with the board, seeing what the game has to offer. And I think you will also find this to be, in my opinion, an intriguing title. It's a cool snowboarding game. I wish we had more options like this. I think they could do like a follow-up. It'd be like Extreme Edition, and maybe just like make it a little bit more like silly over the top. But I like what this is. It's a sort of almost realistic, you know, snowboarding type simulation. It's not over the top ridiculousness, which I think some people will appreciate, but it's still trying to have fun with the characters and the cast it has going on. And I think that in itself is quite cool. I always struggle trying to get, like, flips going. Oh. I'm almost more entertained by just doing silly stuff that doesn't, like, quite pan out. And if you haven't noticed, like, obviously all your stats are being tracked. Like, you've got your scores, you've got your kilometers and your speed and whatnot. And you can adjust these options further as well if you want within the settings so that you can have a more personalized, I guess you would say, a UI aesthetic. Oh, and then you've got like a flow bar too, if you're actually really in the flow. They'll let you know. And that way you can keep things going. Tricky. Just kidding. I wish it was though. Someday. Trying to get that flow bar up all the way to the top. But anyways, I hope this has kind of presented everything, giving you an idea of it. And I'm just going to show some more Shredder's action kind of going on so that you can see more of it and get a further idea of what it has to offer, because I think it's a pretty groovy snowboarding time.